The second one is what was the NCAA's decision, what was the financial impact on UNC, what was the role the media played, and what our team's opinion on. Now Jada will give us an overview of exactly what happened during the NCAA scandal.
Okay, so in 1989 was the beginning of the fake classes. Deborah Crowder was the chairman of Afro American, and that was the paper class where athletes started taking classes, and basically they had turned in one paper per semester, and it was like an easy A class for easy athletes to maintain their eligibility. In May 2012, no, sorry, in July 2010, a tweet on the flyer, you should see it, is Marvin Austin. He tweeted a tweet that targeted NCAA and brought their attention because they thought that UNC athletes were receiving extra benefits, and that was like the beginning of the scandal. So in 2012, UNC releases a report that 54 classes over a 4-year span had little to no instructional contact, and that the report had a high percentage of named Guru courses in which temporary grades were converted for permanent ones. And named Guru is the instructor that was leading the fake classes. So in August 2012, UNC announces that they see no apparent violations for the fake class because it was not only were for athletes, but regular students could take them as well. In 2014, whistleblower Mary Willingham released a study of high literacy rates. Mary Willingham is a female that from UNC that she's very also a credible source that dictated that they were taking the big classes. 2015, they released another notice of allegations of the fake classes. So the NCAA kept reopening this investigation because they believed that they were receiving extra benefits. However, in 2017, this year, the NCAA ruled that there were no penalties or violations against UNC because, like in 2012, they were not only benefited for athletes, but they're benefited for regular students as well. And Katie will now give us an overview of how the scandal was handled and the financial impact.
Thanks, Jada. So this was
oh shoot, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. So just to go over what the NCAA is, it's a membership-driven organization that's made up of over 1,123 colleges and universities, 98 voting athletic conferences, and 39 other affiliated organizations. And it's dedicated to safeguarding the well-being of student athletes and equipping student athletes with the skills to succeed on the playing field, in the classroom, and throughout life. But how do these paper classes really help student athletes prepare for success in the future? So to handle this UNC academic scandal, the NCAA referred to it as a fraction process. And this was created by members to ensure fair play and integrity among NCAA schools. So after allegations were made that the UNC had a system of fake classes, the NCAA enforcement staff over here, they were the ones who really handled the entire investigation. And as I said before, it spanned a long period. And then following that, the Committee on Infractions over here, a separate organization that was made up of individuals from NCAA schools as well as the public, held a hearing to review the facts that were discovered by the enforcement staff. And they also were the ones who determined if violations would be found, and they also determined whether penalties should be applied. So throughout the entire investigation, there were 3 notices of allegations and 5 top-level charges. The most severe being a lack of internal control and a failure to monitor. However, ultimately no violations regarding those 2 were found, and the only 2 violations that the NCAA actually charged were against two former staff members of the African and Afro-American Studies Department. And these were against Julius Niangaro, who was a professor on record for many of these paper classes, and Deborah Crowder, who was an administrator and was the one who was really pushing forward this idea of paper classes. And the punishments received by both are as follows. Julius Niangaro actually received a 5-year show cause penalty, but for him it didn't really have any impact because he was retired and he wasn't an athletic coach. Deborah Crowder actually didn't receive any punishment because she decided to recant later on and state that she was part of it and helped out with the investigators once she was asked at a later time. So the NCAA ultimately didn't find any violations against UNC overall. However, they did acknowledge that UNC had hosted academic fraud, and they simply stated that they couldn't conclude that it occurred or that NCAA violations occurred because these paper classes were offered to the general student body. So if these classes had only been offered to athletes, then the NCAA would have had jurisdiction on the matter. So now that I've talked about the NCAA as well as UNC, let's go over how they make money. So the NCAA is classified as a nonprofit despite its last year's revenue of $870 million. And this is because over 4%, or actually, I'm sorry, all but 4% is returned directly to student athletes and programs to benefit them, such as member conferences and to support championships. The majority of their revenue actually comes from their television and marketing rights fees. And last year, the NCAA actually signed a $10.8 billion agreement with CBS Sports and Turner Broadcasting that was $10.8 billion over a 14-year span. And then the other majority of contributions to the NCAA comes from the selling of ticket sales for its championship. Much of UNC's revenue, on the other hand, comes from athletics as well as contributions. And so far, the scandal and the entire investigation process hasn't put too much of a damper on the money collected. Revenue from UNC athletics was $95 million this past year, and as you can see on the graph, it looks like it's steadily increasing. There wasn't really any decline. Similarly, donations to, or commitments to UNC and donations have also been increasing in recent years. The NCAA's ruling actually comes at a time when both of these two, the commitments to UNC and donations, have had record years. So this past year, the UNC commitments totaled to $540 million, and this was a 10% increase from the year prior. Similarly, the donations to the Rams Club was around $69 million, and that was a 12% increase from the years prior. And now Sara is going to talk about the impact of the
So during the scandal lasting until starting in 1989, there were over 10,000 news sources published all around the country, not just in North Carolina. This became a national issue. So one of the main news sources was the New York Times, and they focused on the negative impact. So they thought once the case actually happened that UNC should have received punishment. News Observer also thought UNC should receive a punishment due to the paper classes, and Sports Illustrated thought that they should receive a punishment. So many of the top news sources actually disagreed with the ruling and said UNC should have received a punishment due to the paper classes. And then one of the tweets that happened right after during the scandal was the NCAA does not dispute that UNC was guilty of running one of the worst academic fraud schemes in college sports history, involving fake classes that enabled dozens of athletes to gain and maintain their eligibility. So due to these paper classes, the athletes were able to stay eligible and receive grades that they might not deserve. And then to the right, you can see some tweets right after the scandal occurred. It said, "What a disgrace, NCAA and UNC is a joke." So you can see that many people are very disappointed with the outcome and thought UNC should receive a serious punishment. So a news story that I decided to focus on was one that said 11 missing words, some see shift in NCAA case. So they replaced particular sports of football and men's basketball and women's basketball in notion of the allegations with just these paper classes, focusing on all the UNC students, not just athletes. So this is alluding to the fact that only athletes were the ones taking the classes and not the all student body as a whole. So UNC fans hope that these 11 words would lessen the punishment of postseason ban and recruiting restrictions, because you can't really pinpoint that it was only the NCAA students, that it was all of the students as a whole. So the long-term impact of the UNC's reputation, as Katie said before, the sales are still increasing, but in the long run, there might be less applications for UNC, because if your school is known as a school that has achievement scandal, you might not want to attend the school. The UNC diploma has less value, saying that if someone worked really hard in another school to get their diploma, rather than some UNC athletes might have only taken a paper class where they had to write one paper and not go to class, that their diploma might not have less value. Student athletes are hesitant to attend UNC due to the allegations. Many students might be unaware or unwilling to attend the school due to these paper classes. A lot of student athletes come to the school to play their sports, but they also want to come to get an education. And then less future alumni donations. As Katie said before, they're still increasing, and an increase from 2015 to 2016. But in the long run, if alumni donations could decrease if the alumni are disappointed with how the UNC scandal was actually happened. And loss of employees. So many employees throughout UNC decided to resign and leave due to the allegations, because they're embarrassed that their school had these allegations for so many years. And those two people that Katie was saying, they ended up leaving because they were embarrassed, and they were one of the reasons that the scandal existed. And now Tyler will talk about our team's opinion and what we exactly thought should have happened.
So while student athletes likely benefited from the courses, so did the general student body. Additionally, the record did not establish that the university created and offered the courses as part of a systemic effort to benefit only student athletes. This is a quote from Greg Sankey. He's the SEC commissioner, and he took point for the infractions committee on this investigation. And this quote by itself shows why the NCAA couldn't punish UNC. As disappointing as it is, I mean, we saw the tweets about the people's reactions to UNC not even really getting a slap on the wrist. But there are guidelines for the NCAA to follow, and so as following those guidelines, they couldn't punish UNC because no violations were found, which is why it's our team's opinion that, as disappointing as it is, the ruling was just. But the NCAA isn't the only organization involved, so because there's no violation from them, it makes it more of an internal affair. And so UNC is tied to the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools, which is their accreditation organization. So in 2014, when the scandal really kind of blew up to a national level, SACS, the accreditation organization, deemed that UNC had failed to satisfy the standards in 18 different categories. So UNC, they took accountability for the scandal and for the academic fraud. They showed remorse, but most importantly, they took action. And so they disbanded the paper classes, and within a year, the SACS had agreed that UNC had satisfied 11 of the 18 standards that they had failed the year before, which took them off of their year-long probationary status and renewed their accreditation in 2015. So, as a whole, for the university, it's very unethical for them to offer these paper classes, especially for so long. But you can't only focus on the ethics of the university. Personal accountability has to come in play. And so for a student athlete, from 1996 to 2014, there were 25 men's basketball players that were drafted and 69 football players that were drafted. And this doesn't include those that made it to the next level as undrafted free agents. So the number is actually higher than 94 of those who made it to the professional level. And these are men, and there's also women's basketball players, but so these are men and women who all their lives had excelled on the field or the court, and they've been told most of their lives that you're going to make it to that top level, you're going to be a professional. And so for some people, that gets to their heads, and that's their only goal in life. That is their one plan, to go professional. And so when you get to UNC and you see that there's a paper class offered, that you don't have to show up, and you only have to write one paper at the end to keep your eligibility, especially if you need to keep your eligibility, you're going to take that class. Is it ethical? I wouldn't say it's unethical for the student, but for the university to offer the class, yes, it's unethical. But the athletes are just taking advantage of the opportunities given to them. On the student side, there's a reason it's student athlete and not athlete student. So the student part comes first. So it's your personal responsibility to take control of your education. This is college. These are grown men and women. So they ultimately make the decision on what classes they take. But like I said, they take advantage of the opportunities given to them. And it wasn't just a student athlete thing. You know, other regular students were offered the opportunity to take these classes, and 3,100 of them took advantage of it. So with that, does anyone have any questions?
Chandler, you want to start?
Yeah. I just asked one of them.
Yeah, just ask one.
Okay. Did the media have a negative bias toward the UNC scandal?
I can take that question because that's what I focused on. I think the media did have a negative bias toward the allegations throughout the case. So many media sources thought that it was a no-brainer that the UNC would receive a punishment, and when they didn't receive a punishment, many of the news sources were very disappointed, mad, and kind of annoyed that the NCAA did not take the appropriate documentation. But in reality, because of the 11 words taken out of the class, they had no reason to give a punishment as much as we would like UNC to have a punishment. Talking as the student body as a whole and not just focusing on the athletes is a really big determinant, because if it was only the athletes taking the classes, then it would be more likely that the NCAA takes the appropriate measures. But because other athletes were taking it, I don't think that they deserved a punishment. But the media did not really agree with that. They thought that UNC should have received a punishment.
Other questions? Nicole?
It's for Jada. It says, as an athlete, how do you feel about the other athletes receiving extra benefits than you?
As a student athlete, I feel like it was not fair that they had the opportunity to take the easy way out. However, I do care about my education, and I feel like if I was at UNC, I probably would not take that class simply because I want to have a nice degree. I don't like to take the easy way out, and I would like to maximize my education and get the best of it.
Katie, how is the NCAA's third notice of allegations against UNC different from the first two? So it was different in terms of the time frame that they used, first of all. So in the most recent allegation, the third one, it was the 2002 fall semester to 2012 semester. And the previous allegations also excluded the fall as well as the basketball program. So the third allegation included those. And then lastly, it differed from the other two because it directly implicated Deborah Crowder as well as Julie Spangar, who are both affiliated with these classes and really discredited that program for the summer program.
Stephanie?
Okay, why did it take almost 20 years for people to pay attention to the paper classes?
It took almost 20 years because no one spoke up. I mean, the whistleblower, that's what started it. It took one person internally. So as the school is benefiting from players being eligible and continuing to succeed on the field or on the court, and the student athletes are benefiting from being able to play, no one felt the need to speak up. It's a win-win in their eyes. They're taking advantage of the loophole in the NCAA rules, so no one felt the need to speak up until they did.
Great. that's about all we have time for. You're just over 20 minutes, so great job, everybody. Thank you. As we're transitioning to the next team, why don't the next team get your presentation up, and let's give some feedback to Katie, Tyler, Jada, and Sara. Who wants to start? What'd they do well? Ellie.
You guys had really great tone and projection. I was able to hear everyone very well. You guys seemed really well prepared and did really well.
I agree. Yes, Nicole.
I thought your PowerPoint was really well put together. It was easy to read. It was visually appealing. I really liked it.
And I'll agree to both points. Well prepared, they all knew their stuff equally, right? You could tell everybody really had a good focus. The slides really professional, nicely done, and the flow really made good sense to me. Chandler.
I liked your use of transitions between the slide and how you guys were very engaged in each other's what each other were talking about, because it helped me stay engaged and know what was going on and
How were they engaged? Just visually?
Visually and in between slides, saying oh, so and so's going to talk about this, and then when you were talking about whatever, you were nodding and things like that.
The good transitions. Yes, Ellie.
And I also kind of liked how you guys referred back to the person who went in front of you or behind you or whatever because it reminded me what the other person talked about and how you related it to what you guys were talking about.
It's a real good sense of cohesion and teamwork, right? So nicely done. I'm going to let these guys get set up. Take a few minutes to fill out your form. I'm going to